The year was 1975, May 1st to be exact, a silent memorial in American railroading history. "63 years of relentless effort and industrial might came to a quiet end. The Western Maryland Railway's Connellsville extension, a triumph of engineering and ambition, ceased to exist as a through route. It had carried men and machines through some of the most rugged terrain in the eastern United States. And just like that, it was over. Once hailed as one of the most technologically advanced rail lines in the country, the extension was now labeled surplus. What wasn't torn out by policy was swallowed slowly by time and nature. A casualty, not of war, but of economics, and perhaps short-sightedness. Fortunately, not all was lost. Large sections of the extension were left intact, rails, bridges, and stonework preserved for the future. Decades later, this foresight allowed parts of the line to be revived for excursions and trails, long before the federal concept of rail banking would formalize such preservation in 1983. The extension had been built with purpose. Between 1910 and 1912, at a cost exceeding $12 million, an extraordinary sum was poured into 86 miles of rail connecting Cumberland, Maryland to Connellsville, Pennsylvania. The goal? To link with the Pittsburgh and Lake Erie and rival the mighty Baltimore and Ohio. The extension wasn't just a railroad, it was a challenge thrown down in the heart of the Alleghenies, a challenge answered by building the lowest maximum elevation rail crossing through the heart of the ancient Allegheny Mountains. The Western Maryland had already proven its mettle with the Cumberland extension. That success set the stage for this even greater push westward. Today, the right-of-way lives on, not with roaring freight trains, but under the wheels of bicycles and the footsteps of hikers along the Great Allegheny Passage and through the ghostly echoes of the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad. The route still drives local economies and tells its story, if you know where to listen. To understand this story, we must go back, way back, to the days when railroads were still in their infancy and many existed only on paper. In 1852, the Maryland legislature chartered a modest line, the Baltimore, Carroll, and Frederick Railroad. By 1853, it bore a new name, the Western Maryland Railroad. By the 1890s, after early expansions, the WM caught the attention of George Gould, son of the infamous Jay Gould. With the backing of the Fuller Syndicate, George envisioned a transcontinental railroad solely under his control, stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The dream nearly came true. What stood in his way was a gap between Hagerstown and Pittsburgh. Part of that missing piece would become the Cumberland Extension, built between 1904 and 1906, slicing through the Potomac Highlands with bold efficiency. Nearly 6% of the Cumberland Extension rose on bridges or tunneled beneath mountains, a marvel few competitors could match. When the Western Maryland reached Cumberland in 1906, the city was a hub of manufacturing and trade, boasting a population of around 20,000. In its push west to Cumberland, the WM acquired two key lines, the West Virginia Central and Pittsburgh, and the Georges Creek and Cumberland, tapping into the vast resources of the Alleghenies. But progress always comes at a cost, and for the Western Maryland, that bill came due with the financial panic of 1907. Bankruptcy followed, but from the wreckage a new company emerged, the Western Maryland Railway, reborn in 1910. A survey crew was dispatched, and a new line was plotted from GC Junction northward to Connellsville. The mileposts on this route bore a B for Baltimore, and near B167.9, the true extension began. Legend has it that the Connellsville extension was among the first railroads in America to be partially surveyed by air, a bold new frontier in engineering. By summer 1910, construction had begun. Just west of the Cumberland Narrows, a 310-foot steel truss bridge began rising above the valley. Its builders, McClintock Marshall of Pittsburgh, later absorbed by Bethlehem Steel, would go on to supply steel for legends, including the Golden Gate Bridge. Though Cumberland was the official eastern terminus, the yards and engine terminal were located just across the Potomac River in Ridgely and Carpenter's Addition, West Virginia. Knob Mount was the Western Maryland's eastbound classification yard, complete with an icing platform for perishable shipments and a scale house for weighing coal hoppers. Just west lay the Maryland Junction Engine Terminal, complete with its roundhouse and shops, served as the heart of locomotive maintenance. Farthest west was Ridgely Yard, home to the car shop and westbound classification yard. Together, these three terminals form the backbone of the Western Maryland's operations around Cumberland. Today, Ridgely Yard still echoes with life, maintaining the equipment of the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad. And Cumberland? It's adapted slowly to the change in economics, from the once bustling city of commerce and industry to a charming community with a tourism-based economy. Cumberland's early passenger station was a humble Union station originally serving 3 railroads, but by 1906, the station was shared only with the Pennsylvania Railroad. In 1913, a grander station opened, designed by Baltimore architect C.M. Anderson. On June 15, 1913, the Wild Mary launched daily through service between Baltimore and Chicago in cooperation with the Pittsburgh and Lake Erie and the New York Central. The Chicago Limited and Baltimore Limited were the pride of the fleet, equipped with Pullman sleepers, electric lights, and every comfort a traveler could desire. But the luxuries faded with time. Through trains ceased service in 1917, and by 1931, all local passenger service between Cumberland and Connellsville had ended. The station lingered on in use until 1959, then serving just railroad executives after, and it began to pass into memory. Thankfully, it survives, repurposed, preserved and reborn as the eastern gateway of the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad. From here, the line begins its relentless climb towards the Allegheny summit. 16 miles west of Cumberland, the tracks rise roughly 1,700 feet towards Frostburg, an ascent etched with 3 great horseshoe curves. First came Kriegbaum, an 8-degree left-hand curve veiled in the trees above Corriganville, Maryland. During construction of the curve, workers unearthed a cave where paleontologists from the Smithsonian Institution discovered over 40 species of Ice Age animal fossils. Next is Helmstedter's Curve, a graceful 7-degree arc nearly a half-mile long spanning the Cache Valley. Just beyond Helmstedter's Curve, the line entered Tit Cut and then into the mouth of Brush Tunnel, piercing 914 feet of darkness beneath a promontory of Piney Mountain. Built with steel-reinforced concrete, construction began in September 1910 and was completed the following year. The tunnel is now a favorite spot for photography. Originally double-tracked, much of the east slope was reduced to single-track in the 1950s following the installation of centralized traffic control. The sidings at Lapp and Frostburg kept trains moving through the years, and at Lapp, a 50,000-gallon water tank once quenched the thirst of the mighty steam locomotives. Just west of Lapp lay the final horseshoe curve, Woodcock Hollow. Even into the 1970s, the remnants of a coal mine stood near the crossing, a silent witness to the region's most prolific industry. For a time, the Western Maryland ran parallel to the Cumberland and Pennsylvania Railroad, a coal hauler owned by Consolidated Coal. The WM assumed control of the C&P in 1944 and was finally merged in fully by 1953. The C&P's headquarters were located in Mount Savage, a place of quiet fame. It was there in 1844 that the first iron rails in the Western Hemisphere were rolled, freeing America from dependence on Europe for finished rail products. Mount Savage also gave the world locomotives, its works producing engines from 1881 to 1917. Mount Savage today is a quiet community, existing in the shadows of Big Savage Mountain, with only the distant passing of the WMSR as a reminder of what once was. But not all was progress. Up the hill from Mount Savage on the night of November 15, 1925, tragedy struck. Eastbound Extra 850, a 70-car coal drag, broke apart near Colmar. When the rear section was rolled forward to reconnect, the unthinkable happened. The cars failed to couple, and the front half of the train began to run away. 34 cars and the locomotive derailed across nearly 2 miles of track. No physical trace of the wreck remains, only the record and the weight of what was lost. Just beyond the wreck site lies Frostburg, Maryland, a historic city nestled in the mountains, home to miners, merchants, and later students at Frostburg State University. The Western Maryland arrived in 1911. A year later, they built their own station, a proud symbol of progress that served the community for half a century until flames consumed it in 1960. For a time, the Western Maryland's agent worked from the neighboring Cumberland and Pennsylvania station, but by the 1970s, that depot too had fallen silent. In the years before the Western Maryland's arrival, the Cumberland and Pennsylvania was forced to navigate the mountains with ingenuity. To climb out of the Jennings Run Valley and reach Frostburg, trains had to wrestle with the steep switchback, a taxing maneuver on both man and machine. When the Western Maryland pressed its extension through the region, the old C&P alignment was shifted at a place known as Sheridan. From there, the line wound along sharp curves and a punishing 2.8% grade, where a deep cut in the hillside demanded the building of 2 bridges to span the new Western Maryland tracks below. For decades, it remained an important junction, with freight climbing the steep grades into Frostburg. After the severing and eventual abandonment of the majority of the Connellsville extension, several sections remained intact to serve industries that still required shipment by rail, such as a portion of the line to reach a mine in the vicinity of Colmar, as well as the C&P's line into Frostburg and Zillman. In 1988, a twist of fate occurred with the reactivation of the first 14 miles of the extension, as well as the C&P line into Frostburg for Western Maryland's scenic predecessor, Allegheny Central. Today, the 1891-built C&P depot survives and marks the western terminus of the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad, as well as serving as a trailhead for the Great Allegheny Passage, featuring access to lodging, dining, and other unique experiences. Two miles west, Borden Tunnel pierces a promontory of Big Savage Mountain in the vicinity of Samson Rock. 957 feet of quiet concrete. Beyond, the line climbs the spine of the Appalachian Mountains, known as Big Savage Mountain, offering one of the most spectacular views afforded on the East Coast at a location known as Colmar. Colmar was the end of the 1.75% grade west from Cumberland, the railroad having gained roughly 1,700 feet in elevation in 21 miles. Colmar was also the end of the double track that ran from Cumberland. However, with the installation of CTC, only a helper pocket remained here, and that too was eventually removed thereafter. A tower was once located here as well and remained in service until 1946, with it being removed by 1948. Just a few hundred foot west of Colmar lies the Great Bore, Big Savage Tunnel at 3,295 feet long. Built with timber and grit, legend has it swallowed men in quicksand during construction and took its name from a man named John Savage, an early surveyor who, legend says, avoided cannibalism in these very hills. About a mile west of the tunnel lies Deal, location of the Eastern Continental Divide, as well as the summit of the Alleghenies for the Western Maryland at 2,375 feet. Deal once was the location of a train order office that was closed in the 1950s, along with a Y for turning locomotives. Today, only memories remain. At Deal, the Western Maryland's new main line had crested the Alleghenies, but the story was far from over. Ahead lay deep river valleys, bustling coal towns, and a fierce struggle with geography itself. The road to Connellsville would demand as much resolve and money as anything the WM had faced before.